Remember cumulative tests back in school? That was a teacher's way of saying that everything that you've learned across the whole semester is going to be on the exam. Well, this is the cumulative test part of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Get ready for the most important final exam of your entire life. Hey guys, welcome to our special series here at 30 on Thursdays in which we focus on Jesus' world-famous teaching known as the Sermon on the Mount. Pastor David here with you, and in this week's episode, Jesus concludes his message that has captivated the hearts and minds and the attention of billions across the years. And as he does so, he tells us exactly what to do with everything that he's taught us. Here, check it out. Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. And when Jesus finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority and not as their scribes. So at the end of his famous sermon, in which he's addressed giving and praying and enemies and forgiveness and lust and divorce and anger and about a dozen other really important topics, Jesus closes by telling us about two people who had so much in common they might have been identical twins. For starters, both of these people were men. And on top of that, both of these men decided to build themselves a home for their lives, for their families. And in fact, both of these men actually succeeded in building their respective homes, but the commonalities don't end there. Jesus goes on to tell us that both of these men's homes experienced a storm. Now, the storm that hit this man's house was so similar to the storm that hit that man's house that it might very well have been the exact same storm, because on both accounts, Jesus says the rain fell and the floods came and the winds blew and beat against both men's homes. And when those homes were struck by the storm, it revealed one seemingly small difference between them that ended up making all the difference in the world. See, the first man was wise enough to build his house on rock. He made the investment and he dug down deep. He found a layer of solid stone that would securely anchor his home, and he fastened his foundation to it. And so, when the storm came, as violent as it was, his house was safe, as was his life. However, the second man was foolish. Instead of searching for the security of rock, he settled for the convenience of sand. It's a lot easier and cheaper to build on sand. However, it's also very risky to do so. And so when this man's house was hit by a storm, it fell with a crash. Jesus says, actually, it fell with a great crash. The second man lost everything, and all because he built his house on sand instead of rock. Now, the point of Jesus' story is obvious. We need to build our lives on the same kind of strong, safe, and secure foundation that the first man used to build his home upon. For him, it was actually a layer of bedrock, but for us, according to Jesus, it's his word. If we want our lives to be as secure as that first man's home was, it was built on a rock, then we must build our lives on the teachings of Jesus. Because guys, the only alternative is sand. And sand, it shifts. Like all the time. And if you build your life on something that fluctuates so easily, well, guess what? You're going to be slipping and sliding with it, and that can be costly. For example, you can build your life on feelings or the feelings of those around you. But since feelings shift about 15 times a day, your collapse will be immediate and costly. Now, you can build your life on what culture says at any given moment, but when it decides to change its fickle mind, and it always does, you'll be left stumbling and staggering. You can even build your life on the law of the land. But even our laws have been known to get wonky from time to time. And if there's one thing you want to avoid when building your life, it's wonky. Now, the only way to have a secure life is to have a secure foundation. And the only secure foundation in life, for life, the teachings of Jesus. Even that very first audience gathered there on the mountain that day with Jesus recognized the truth and validity of his teachings. The very last line that we read tells us that those humble farmers and shepherds and fishermen, they all recognized the authority embedded in Jesus' teachings. What he said and how he said it and how he lived it out set him apart from all the other teachers of his day. And so as you consider everything that Jesus has taught us across this message and consider what he's telling us to do with everything that he's taught us here in this final passage, don't miss these last few crucial lessons. First, storms will blow into every life. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, famous or unknown, wise or foolish, even Christian or unbeliever. Every single life will get hit with a storm, probably many. And when that happens, and it's inevitable that it will, there's only one way to be prepared. Number two, don't just listen to Jesus' words, obey them. Jesus doesn't ever tell us to just hear his words or reflect on his words or even to agree with his words. No. Jesus expects us to move beyond all the lip service and the mental assent all the way to actually obeying his words. See, that rock, guys, it wouldn't have helped that first man build his home if he hadn't have built on it. Likewise, Jesus' teachings won't help us if we don't build our lives on them. And so lastly, build your life on the rock-solid teachings of Jesus. Each of us have a very simple choice to make in life. We can build our life as secure as a castle or as flimsy as a sandcastle. Okay? And none of us would be so foolish as to literally try to live our lives in a sandcastle next to the powerful tides. So why build a life on shifting sands that will leave us devastated? No. Instead, build your life on the unchanging, completely secure, and eternity-tested teachings of Jesus. All right, guys, there you have it. The conclusion of Jesus' world-famous Sermon on the Mount. Now, as usual, we've put together a short Bible study for you on this part of the message, and you can find it down in the description box beneath this video. However, we also address this important passage in Censoring Jesus, so you might want to grab a copy of that and read through it as well. There'll be a link down there for that, so grab some friends and check it out. We just want you to have every single tool that you could possibly need in order to hear, believe, and obey every word that Jesus taught. And Jesus had a lot to say after his Sermon on the Mount. So keep listening to Jesus and trusting what he says, and we'll see you right back here for the very next episode of 30 on Thursdays.